Activated, your window into an extraordinary world lived by many yet celebrated by few. We showcase how to rally for persons with disabilities, taking you on a journey with valuable life lessons and intriguing personalities, leaving you ready for action. Activated takes us on a journey of taking lessons from persons with disabilities and how we must do things differently to unleash the contribution persons with disabilities can and must make to building a disability-inclusive Mzansi. In today's program, we focus on disability and sexual reproductive health. We speak to Nobathembu Peters about self-love and acceptance that leads to sexual health and holistic living. We meet Dr. Callista Kahonde, a passionate disability researcher and advocate with a background in physiotherapy and a PhD in disability studies. And we end our show with Bongani Mapumulo, down in Cape Town, as we speak with him about physical disability and masculinity. Hello, and welcome to Activated with me, Helga Barkhuizen. Die samelewing glo grootliks die mite dat persone met gestremdhede nie seksueel aktief is nie, geen seksuele begeertes het nie, nie in staat is om seksuele omgang te hê nie en hulle dus uitsluit van seksuele voortplanting, gesondheidsorgdienste en ouerskap. Hierdie wanpersepsie of oortuiging lei tot negatiewe diskriminerende houdings en lei tot probleme vir persone met gestremdhede om toegang tot seksuele gesondheidsorgdienste te kry. Interestingly enough, South Africa's National Disability Policy, the White Paper on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, includes intimacy assistance in the defined scope of personal assistance services. Now let's get activated. Nobathembu Peters is 'n seksgesondheidsorgadvokaat, beïnvloeder, gestremdheidsaktivis, sowel as 'n voormalige OnlyFans rekeninghouer. Dit het haar laat besef dat daar 'n groot leemte en 'n groot behoefte is om beide die nie-gestremde en gestremde mense oor seksuele gesondheid in te lig. Ons het by haar 'n draai gaan maak. As an influencer and activist, she has made it her business to educate society that being disabled does not take away the natural desire for sexual fulfillment in people and the ability to engage in sexual activities within the correct context.
Ukhula nge-disability or ukhula ndikhubazekile andithi i-accident yami yenzeka ndina-3, so I was very young when this drunk driver drove into me, leaving me paralyzed for life. The doctor said I would never be able to walk again, and since then, I've tried to live my life to the best of my ability. And I mean, uphila ngengubazeko akululanga, especially abe South Africa, kunzima. Bekunzima ukhula ndingafani nabanye abantwana. And I used to ask myself, ukuthi theni ndingafani nabanye abantwana? And I had to realize, ukuthi hayi man, mina ndinomehluko. Therefore, I need to do things ngendlela ezonceda and ngendlela ezonsebenzela. So it was really, really tough, but here I am. Sex education for mna as umuntu okhubazekileyo bingekho. There was just sex education for non-disabled people, you know, education that they can relate to, not education that I could relate to, you know. So that's why I was like, man, I cannot relate to that, because as a disabled person, it does not make sense to me, because how do I apply that to my situation, you know? And that's how I started doing what I'm doing, because funa umuntu disabled akwazi ufumana information angakwazi urelate kuyo, you know, not just in their generalized way, because general information does not apply to different disabilities. And I want every single person with a disability to be able to relate and be like, hey man, they understand the land, because ndiyakwazi uyenza or ndiyarelate kuyo. So yeah, I use social media platforms to advocate for the sexual rights of people with disabilities, and that's where I share more of my personal experiences, especially like my sexual experiences, relationship experiences, so that people who can relate, they are able to be like, okay, I understand what she means when she says this, you know. I entered the sex space because I saw ukuthi hayi man le conversation yinto esingathethi ngayo, like xa umuntu uthetha ngesex ujonga kakubi or kuthiwa you hayi azithanda izinto, you know, engathi ndiyaphapha. So I was like hayi man, as umuntu omnyama I know ukuthi le conversation ayo conversation engingancokola nomzali wami ndithi hey mama kwenzeke so na so na so, how do I deal with this? So there's a taboo when it comes to sex in general, especially in the Black community, you know. So let me take this as a challenge. Let me use lento ungafuna uthethwa ngayo ngithethe ngayo and ngingafihlisi nix ndingabe nazo nenhloni, because abanye abantu xa bencokola nami ngibona umuntu like uyazibuza hayi lo girl usithatha isibindi. So it's not about uba nesibindi, it's about like ndifuna nyani kube khona umehluko man, so that as abantu abamnyama singahlupheki, you know, or singazifihli i-sexual violences esizi-experienceayo or i-sexual experiences zethu singazifihli, you know, or singasebenzisi i-internet as a means of finding education or finding information, but sikwazi uncokola ngezinto, sikwazi uncokola nabazali bethu or like elderly people, you know, who have experience. Thethe nabo sithi hayi man sisi kwenzeke so ngicela ungicebise, you know. But kwi-Black communities ayikho loo nto, you know, andikwazi veske ndithethe nosisi wam omdala ndithi hey mntana sengakhe sincokola ngale nto, you know. It's a taboo, so I'm trying to just close the gap so that there's less frowning when it comes to having open and honest conversations about sex. So the advice that I would love to give to anyone with a disability is, firstly, accept your disability, obviously at your own pace. It doesn't happen overnight, and learn to be outgoing. You know, you might not like being in social spaces, but get out, meet other people with disabilities, you know, dibana nabantu nje ukubethwe umoya, you know, ungasoloko uzivalele endlini uphume xa usiya kwagqirha or uphume xa uyogrosa, like ngakuzikhupha uzivise kamandi, you know, enjoy life and suzilimitha, you know, uthi you hayi ndiphelele kule wheelchair akho nto inophinde ndenze ngobomi bam. No, go do things that you used to do, especially if let's say maybe ukhubazeke somdala, zenze ezanto ubuthanda uzenza ungeka kwi-wheelchair or ungekalimali, you know, qhubekeka uzenze ezanto, but obviously uzozenza ngendlela ezokunceda nawe as umuntu disabled, you know. And then just be yourself, like sutshintsha ngokube ngumuntu obhitha, umuntu osihleli nje uyacomplaina, like ucomplaina ayincedi mntu, you know. You have to own up, take your power. If uyabona ukuthi hayi man kukho need efuneke ichinje apha, do something about it, you know. And that is what I did. I saw ukuthi hayi man xa kuthethwa ngesex abantu aba-disabled aba-includwa kwezo conversations, and I was like I'm going to start the conversation so that mna ndibone olu tshintsho ndilifunayo. So now as umuntu disabled, be the change you want to see in your community. If you see a lack in media coverage when it comes to disabled people, make sure ukuthi bayakubona, uyaviwa, you know. Don't lock yourself behind closed doors. It's not cute.
After the break, we chat with Dr. Callista Kahonde, who recently completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Stellenbosch University, Center for Disability and Rehabilitation Studies. She is a passionate researcher with special interests in intellectual disabilities, family support, community living, and sexuality and reproductive rights of people with disabilities. Ons is nou weer terug. Welcome back. Dr. Callista Kahonde's specific interest is in giving a voice to people with intellectual disabilities and their families, especially in areas of family and community living, sexuality, and reproductive health. Her PhD study explored the responses of family caregivers to the sexuality of young adults with intellectual disabilities. This was followed by postdoctoral research that explored adults with intellectual disabilities knowledge, perceptions, and experiences of sexuality. Hello, Doctor. Thanks for joining us all the way from Cape Town.
Hello, Helga, and hello to your viewers.
You've contributed a great deal to the research on intellectual disabilities. What inspired you to go into this field?
The experiences that led me into this work are very foundational to what I do. And I always say they help me to keep my heart and my head together in my disability work. I grew up in a family with two siblings with intellectual disabilities. I have a brother and a sister who both have intellectual disability, and they are now adults. So when I encountered the discipline of disability studies, I just started thinking of what could I do, to, empower people with intellectual disabilities, bring their needs more to the fore, because I could see that when you look at work that is being done for people with other impairments, intellectual disability is very much neglected, maybe because they most of the times cannot self-advocate. Other people with other disabilities are able to stand up for themselves, and so I decided to go into this field. And then it was through my PhD that I actually took a turn from physio and became a full-time intellectual disability scholar. And after my PhD, I found myself doing more advocacy work. Like I mentioned earlier, that I do a lot of writing, I do training, I also develop resources to empower people with intellectual disabilities.
Further to your research in various publications and papers, what is the current situation in South Africa and the correlation between intellectual disabilities and sexual reproductive health?
At the moment, the discourses are still quite negative, especially just looking at the general layman within the society. But when you look at people who work with intellectual disabilities, because they're adopting a human rights perspective more and more, there is that shift, of accepting that people with intellectual disabilities also have the right, to be sexual, right to choose partners, even to become parents with the right kind of support, and also looking at their level of function and whether they're able to give consent or not. There are a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration, but there is support that is coming in. So there is like more negativity within the general society, but there is a shift among the service providers and also some of the parents. But I think one thing that I find more alarming that keeps coming up in my research is the rate of sexual abuse that is being perpetrated against people with intellectual disabilities. Sometimes I go out working on a different concept, but it's something that comes up even more, like from the families. And you find that it happens at all levels, within the community, at the schools, within the home. And it's quite concerning because the people who are supposed to be supporting them and protecting them are the ones who are actually, perpetrating this violence. So those are like the main things that I can say I am finding in my research at the moment.
Doctor, in closing, what advice do you have for our viewers out there? Where can they reach out to find help or deal with issues related to intellectual disabilities?
At the moment in South Africa, there is very little happening in terms of support, especially for families who are actually the most in need, because you find that people with intellectual disabilities are normally the responsibility of the family throughout their lifetime. But there are resources out there. I would recommend especially the Western Cape Forum for Intellectual Disability. They've developed quite a number of resources, books and manuals that both parents and organizations can use. And I've also a few resources that I'm working on myself at the moment that have not been launched yet, but once they're out there, they'll be able to access them. So yeah, it's not much that is happening, but that is the little that is there now. There are probably also maybe private practitioners who are working in this area, but sometimes you don't find them in the public domain. So if it's parents, I advise them to also check with their service providers, the schools, the workshops where their children go, so they can be able to find the right kind of support and referrals.
100%. Thank you so much for your time today, Doctor.
It's been a pleasure, Helga. Thank you for having me.
After the break, we meet up with Bongani Mapumulo, advisor at Planet O, a non-profit organization that focuses on providing lifestyle resources for people with disabilities. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Bongani was walking home from school in the south of Johannesburg with his caregiver and younger brother when he was hit by a car. A vehicle allegedly skipped a red traffic light and collided with another car. One of the drivers lost control of their vehicle and ran him over. He suffered permanent mental and physical disability as a result of the accident. Ons het 'n draai by hom in Kaapstad gemaak. Bongani holds an honours degree in Disability and Rehabilitation Studies from the University of Stellenbosch. As a student, he managed the Special Needs Portfolio of the Student Representative Council. He is also a contributor in the book Transforming Transformation, as well as the Physical Disability and Sexuality academic paper published in 2017.
The reason I was very much fascinated with the disability and sexuality research or the study that I was, forming part of was not just to understand myself in relation to society, but also to speak about how I see and how I experience the sort of like the opposite gender, because I remember in school when we would talk about relationships, for instance, dating a able-bodied woman, for instance, it's something that we never thought would be possible. We never thought would be normal, simply because from an able-bodied or normative perspective, they don't necessarily view men with disabilities as complete and worthy of sort of like being in relationships with. And I got to sort of like understand that there is a little bit more to that, in a sense that, if there's an expectation of physical ability in order to be a good boyfriend or a good partner, I think it's a very limited view of, sexuality and how one can be masculine within their own way, And I'd say even after sort of like that study, I think I viewed myself way more positively, because I think I was able to see that there's definitely way more to people than the limitations that other people can sort of like place on them. And it helped a great deal, and I hope the people that are out there can also be able to understand that a physical limitation doesn't necessarily equal inability to be a good partner, because there's a lot more that goes with that. You can be kind, you can be caring, you can be nurturing, all qualities that I think a partner should have, as opposed to looking at them as just this person with a disability, therefore they fall short or they are missing something. When you talk about hegemonic masculinity, which is like the sort of like the orthodox type of masculinity, some like to call it the alpha, right? That is sort of like the full package of what a male specimen is supposed to sort of like encompass. So as a person with the disability, or a man with the disability now, you kind of have to sort of like locate yourself within that hierarchy as a thing. Do I, how does this relate to me, or how do I relate to this? And that definitely becomes very, very daunting, because all of a sudden you are looking at yourself in the sort of like the lens of what is out there, as opposed to looking more like deep down inside you to think that, what makes you unique, or what you as who you are, and why do you perhaps feel the way that you do, but also how do you become an individual after knowing sort of like those expectations. And for me personally, it became really important that I look at my story again and where I come from, what I've been able to sort of like overcome, and to think how many of those positives can I actually build on, and not focus on, the expectations that I can't necessarily fulfill. Because, I think there's still way more that people have to offer, and I feel that way as well. And that has been, very, very positive for me. And I would like, other people out there to think of themselves in the same sense. I would like to believe that, I'm going to make a very, very good husband out there, and someone who is very much appreciated as a lover and a companion. But what's even more, I think, critical is the fact that I can be able to self-define what family means to me as an individual, and what I would like to build, and where perhaps what direction I would like to take in terms of being a partner and being a father, and perhaps the legacy that I'll be able to leave.
En dit is al vir vandag se program. Ons is volgende Sondag terug. Selfde plek, selfde tyd, only on SABC2 You Belong. Join, like and share Activated on Facebook.